Hey y'all, welcome back. I'm Mel. So, y'all, 6 weeks I came on here. 6 weeks ago, I came on here and I shared my story. I aired out all my dirty laundry, told y'all everything about my life, and then I left. I disappeared. I said, I got to get out of here. But today I wanted to come back on here. I got a lot of questions about my story and kind of what happened afterwards. So today I wanted to share kind of, answer some of the questions that y'all had about my story. I also want to kind of share like what led me up to telling my story and the aftermath of telling my story. And I want to do that because, of course, I want to answer your questions, but I also want to speak to those of you who may be about to do something scary, or maybe you feel like God has called you to share your story, or I don't know, maybe he's just called you to step out and take a step of faith and do something. And so I kind of want to give language to you specifically about what to expect and what may happen afterwards. So yes, that's what I want to talk about today, y'all. I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't trying to start another YouTube channel. Okay, was not trying to do it, but here we are. And so at the end, I'll kind of share a little bit, give all the spiel about Instagram, podcasts, all the other stuff that I do, and kind of what this YouTube channel, will be about. And so I'll do that in the end. But anyway, let's get started. I have my notes here. So if you haven't watched my testimony video, I really encourage you to go watch that first and then come back and watch this. But again, 6 weeks ago, I came on here and I told my story. And just to give a quick 30-second kind of summary, I talked about how in my childhood, I felt like I didn't belong. I didn't really have an identity. I grew up in the church, but I didn't really know God. Grew up in a single parent home, things like that. Anyway, fast forward, moved to college, didn't have an identity and purpose, got wrapped up in toxic relationships, was just, acting a little crazy. I had a really bad temper. I would then go and have an abortion. I attempted suicide. I got arrested. And so a lot of things happened in like college to like right after college, post grad. And so anyway, got myself into a bunch of mess, and then I ended up kind of getting back into the church, and I taught through the process of God winning me back to Him, and of God showing me my purpose, and getting into community, and over time and through that process of surrender, I'm here where I am now, operating in my purpose. Definitely not perfect by any means, but living a life that is surrendered to God and walking in my purpose. I have a business, I have a career, and I'm not saying that as a success story, but I say that more so because, again, I didn't even want to live. I literally attempted to take my life just 5 years ago, and within 5 years, He has done a marvelous work in my life and continues to do that. And so just giving hope out there to those of you who may feel hopeless, that you are not alone. And so yes, please go watch that story. But anyway, that was probably more than 30 seconds. But anyway, so I shared my story, and the first question that people asked me was, when did you know that God told you to share your story? And so actually, or was it they asked me, did it happen all of a sudden, like He just told you and then boom, you did it? And the answer is no. So I actually knew that God was going to use my story back when I was in my mess, and I shared that in my video, that back in 2015, 2014, I had the abortion. I graduated from college and I was at home. I was very depressed because I didn't really have any sense of purpose. And this was actually after, I can't remember if this was after or before I had attempted suicide, but I asked God, I was really depressed, and I asked Him, I was like, man, why do you choose to keep me on this earth? Why won't you just take me out of here? And I remember Him telling me, the question that you should be asking me is not, why haven't I taken you? The question is, why do I continue to keep you here? And when you find that answer, then that's when you'll start to have and find purpose, and find the purpose that I have for you. And so He told me in that same day that He was going to use my story to bring people back to Him. And so I knew even back then that eventually I would sit here today telling my story. And He will remind me along the way. It's not like something I had in the back of my mind the whole time, but even a couple of years ago, I want to say maybe 2017, 2018, God started to reveal to me more about like how He was going to use me to tell my story. And I even remember one time in Easter, it was like an Easter weekend or something like that, He had me actually write out my story. And so I wrote it out for the very first time. This was like 2017, I think, 2018. And I was crying the whole time. It was a mess, but I got through it. I wrote everything out, and then nothing happened after that. And so I say that to my first point, and I do got points, so take notes. But I say that to my first point is that When God reveals something to you, you also want to get clarity about the timing, right? Because there's a time and a season for everything. And if I'm honest, I was not in a season, even a few years ago, where I could have told that story from a healthy place, right? And that brings me to my first point. Point number one is that it's so important when you're about to do something scary or take a step out of faith. It's so important that you sober up your why. That you sober up your why and that you understand that healing starts with you, right? And so I say that because if I'm honest, if I would have told my story back then and there, I would have done it to like try to prove myself to somebody. I would have done it to try to get back at the people that hurt me. I would have done it to, try to make a name for myself, because again, God was still working out things in me and I was still broken. I mean, God, and like I said, I'm not perfect. God continues to do a work, but at that point in time, my motives would have been off. And so even through the process of, getting ready to share my story, I had to sober up my why, meaning that I had to make sure that my heart was in the right place, that my motives were in the right place, that I wasn't just doing this just to do it, but that I was doing it as an act of obedience to God. That it wasn't me. It wasn't about me, wanting to air out everybody's dirty laundry and let people know what they did to me, and stuff like that. And that's another thing that goes to the second part of knowing that healing starts with you. Man, let me tell you, and I talked about in my testimony video that I was in toxic relationships and I would get cheated on, and again I had had an abortion and I did all kind of stuff in those relationships. And I said in the video, I was just as bad, just as toxic. I had a temper out of this world that no one could control, including me. My emotions were all over the place. I mean, it was just toxic on both ends most of the time, right? And so I talk about how, and so I say that because, and I even said this on the podcast once, that healing starts with me. When God started to do that work of healing me from those past relationships, it was easy. It would have been easy to say, oh, well, they did this or they did that to me, and so I need to forgive them, or I can't forgive them until they apologize to me, or I need closure and all this different stuff. And God had to say, no, healing starts with you. Healing is not dependent upon another person. And God had to get me to a place where I can tell my story without placing blame before he would allow me to share it. Because what he was not about to have me do was come on here and talk about what everybody else did to me. I had to understand that healing started with me, that I had to acknowledge the part that I played, right? So I can easily tell you about what everybody else did, but I had to acknowledge my temper. I had to acknowledge what got me in that mess in the first place. I had to acknowledge my faults, right? And so I think when I started to actually heal and heal from my wounds and what was in me that allowed those things to occur, then I think that I was able to actually heal for real, but then be able to tell it without telling it from a place of bitterness or unforgiveness. Like, it's all good. It's all love. I wasn't that person. That person wasn't that person. Those people we are not the same people that we were back then. And so I think that God had to also bring me to that level of healing, but before I could actually openly and publicly share my story. And so I hope that helps someone that may be thinking about sharing their story. Again, I have my notes here, but again, know that healing starts with you, and you have to make sure that you're doing it from the right place, because the Word of God says that man looks at the outer appearance, but God looks at the heart. So even when we putting out all these businesses and all this stuff or whatever, making ourselves look great on the outside, God knows what our true motives is on the inside. And so, yes. And so a question that I also got was, actually, before I do that, I wanted to bring a verse to that, and it says in James 4:1-3, and 10-12, it says, humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up in honor. Don't speak evil against each other, dear brothers and sisters. If you criticize and judge each other, then you are criticizing and judging God's law. But your job is to obey the law, not to judge whether it applies to you. God alone, who gave the law, is the judge. He alone has the power to save or to destroy. So what right do you have to judge your neighbor? What is causing the quarrels and fights among you? Don't they come from the evil desires at war within you? You want what you don't have, so you scheme and kill to get it. You are jealous of what others have, but you can't get it, so you fight and wage war to take it away from them. Yet yet you don't have what you want because you don't ask God for it. And even when you ask, you don't get it because your motives are all wrong. You want what will only give you pleasure. And so God had to keep this verse at the forefront of my mind when I was working on telling my story, when I was healing, is that it's not about me airing everything out. It's not about me again proving myself to my haters and all that stuff. No. It's about it's about me sharing my story to glorify God. And so the next question that somebody asked me, which was a good question, was, did I do this more so for myself? Or did I do it for others? And what did I get out of it specifically? And that's a great question. It kind of ties back into what I was just talking about. I think that it was for both me and for others. I think that it brought a sense of healing to me. I think that it brought a sense of freedom for me to be able to share it with integrity, and just say, hey, this is what I did, but God's mercy and grace saved my life. And so that was very freeing to be able to say that for myself. It was very freeing, and it brought healing to me to just speak it out, to know that my family knows about it and it's all out there and it's all good because I don't have shame anymore about it, right? And of course, I think from that place, I also wanted others to have that sense of freedom, right? And so I think for me, when I was in that dark, down and out place, it was people's stories and testimonies that was getting me through. Again, I grew up in the church, so I knew the verses, I knew the devotionals, I listened to all the sermons, man. But sometimes it's just somebody's story that says, I see you, I've been you, that really kind of helps us move forward. And so it was also, again, to help others. So yes, but I kind of want to shift a little bit. So that's God kind of gave me the permission to tell the story once I healed from it, and once I could speak the story with integrity, once I could do it with integrity and not out of false motives to try to get somebody back, or to make my own name great. And so now to move forward to when God gave me the clearance to tell it. And so kind of how that came about was, again, it wasn't any like the heavens opening and the angel came down. It was more so little confirmations along the way. So the beginning of this year, at my church, we were doing like a prayer and fasting, and one of my friends actually came up to me. I hadn't talked to her really about, I told her my story maybe about a year or so ago, I can't remember, but she came up to me randomly. We hadn't talked in a minute, and she said, your story of redemption, that story of you, God healing you from those things in your college years, that's really going to be the thing that God is going to use you for. And that, it's really going to help because I had already been doing like blogs and stuff like that and helping people with the process, but I hadn't actually told my story. And so she said, when you do that, that's the thing that God's going to use to take you deeper in Him and deeper in your purpose. And so that was at the beginning of this year, and I was kind of like, wow, okay, because again, I had told her parts of my story before, but for her to say that to me was completely out of the blue. Then fast forward later on this year, someone DM'd me, a couple people DM'd me actually, and was like, have you ever thought about writing a book, or have you ever thought about sharing your story? And so it was just like little confirmations like that. Again, God just kind of started to reveal Himself to me in my quiet time, but it wasn't any like, this is the time to tell your story. It was more so like little confirmations along the way. And then even as I was working on it, I felt that peace. I could speak the story without, again, crying or feeling like I need to, pinpoint somebody else. And so there were just confirmations that came along the way. But let me say this, and this is my second point. When it's time to take a step of faith, when it's time to tell your story, when it's time to do something, we always talk about opposition, but it's important to not only expect it and prepare for it, but know that it may also come when you least expect it. And know that just because God is in it doesn't mean that it will be seamless, right? And so it's so important. I'll say that again. For number two, it's so important to expect opposition and to know that just because God is in it doesn't mean the process is going to be seamless, right? So I got those confirmations along the way. Again, I felt God's peace about it. Again, and you feel God's peace when you're not panicked about it, when you're not, again, like, oh my gosh, I just had a peace about telling my story. And so, but it did come with opposition, right? And for me, it didn't come with opposition until literally the very end. And so, I was telling a few people like, oh, I'm going to share my story. And they were like, yeah, let's do it. And I was really afraid. The main thing that I was afraid of was telling my family, because a lot of my family did not know most of the stuff that happened to me in college. And so I was like, man, when I tell my family, they finna be like, I don't know what you thought you was about to do, but you are not about to tell your story and embarrass us. I just knew they were going to say that, And so that was the opposition that I was expecting, right? And so I was like, man, I called my mom and I told her, and I just knew it was going to be like World War III, because she was just going to be like, no, you do not need to put this out there. But she was so supportive of it. She was like, she was like, I'm so proud of you that you would even share this. Like, that inspires me. I was telling my family members about it, and they were all super supportive. I was completely unexpected. I just knew it was going to be like a big rift. And I think even to that, and I may talk about this in point number 3, but even to that, I was still willing to do it, even if it cost me friendships and cost my family, because there's a verse that says that in order to follow me, you must be willing to forsake everybody. And so I just came to a point where I knew that this was from God, and He told me to do it. And so I was willing to have my family not approve for me to be obedient to God. And so I think that that's kind of a bonus point, is you have to get to a point where you're relentless in your obedience to Him, man. If He tells you to do it, He will give you the grace to do it. And He did, because I told Him, I said, man, even if, they don't like this, I'm still going to do it, because I honor you, God, and I know what you told me to do. And God had already prepared their hearts to receive it, to receive the fact that I was telling my story. So it wasn't because of them or me being so great that they approved of it. It was because God had already done the work in their hearts for them to be able to hear and receive my story. And so God has already prepared the way for you, but you have to be relentlessly obedient in what He asks you to do. And so, but moving to the opposition piece, everything was going smoothly. We had recorded the video, everything was going fine. And then, the days would kind of come up to where I was originally going to post a video on my birthday. And so I remember the day before my birthday, I was still kind of waiting to get the video back. And I was kind of laying down. I was kind of just having a moment with God. And I was just kind of laying there. And I remember Him telling me so strongly, He said, Mel, you're going to have to re-record the video tonight, and you're going to post it on Sunday, not tomorrow. And I was like, and now keep in mind, this is the day before I was about to post it. And I was like, wait, what? And again, I'm not a video expert, so I had help to get the video done. And so when God told me, like, you're going to have to re-record the video and post it 3 days later, I was like, are you sure? Like, did I hear you right? But I promise you, He told me clear as day. And so I was laying there, and I was kind of like, okay, well, let me just kind of wait it out, right? And so then fast forward, I actually ended up having to re-record it, and then it posted on Sunday. And so that was just kind of an example of like the opposition. That's not to blame anyone. Again, it was just, I think the enemy tried to use that to try to get me riled up, and to try to get me panicked. But I think that it came out when God wanted it to come out. But then on the day, on Sunday, I was originally planning to put out my testimony on YouTube and on my Instagram. And so it loaded up to YouTube, but then it wouldn't load to Instagram. And I tried literally all day Sunday to try to get it to load up, and it wouldn't load. I was praying, I was casting out stuff, I was crying, doing all kind of stuff, trying to pray to the Lord. And it never to this day, it will not upload on Instagram. It will only upload on YouTube. And so I say that because I think towards the end of that Sunday after I posted it, I was like, man, God, did you really tell me to do this? Because I faced all this, opposition leading, the day before. And then, now I'm not able to get it on Instagram. Like, did I not hear you right? Is this you coming against me? And God had to tell me, just because I call you to do something doesn't mean that it's going to be seamless. Oh, that's so good. That is for somebody. I don't know who that's for, but just because God has called you to do something doesn't mean the process will be seamless, right? And so again, I wasn't trying to start the YouTube channel, but I think that there was a reason why he wanted it on YouTube. And so so that's kind of an example of kind of the opposition that I faced, and sometimes the things that the enemy will use to try to get you off track. But it's important to know that opposition may come. You can do your best to pray and prepare. Again, I was praying and all that stuff, but again, God is more so interested in building our trust and our dependence on him than he is about having the perfect product, right? And so so I hope that helps for somebody. I know that was for somebody. I don't know who, but that is for somebody. So yes, I did face some opposition, but again, God's will was done. So lastly, and I'll close with this, the third point, and this, I was kind of talking about this earlier, but the third point that I would say is that it's important when you are about to take a big step, or when you are about to tell your story, or when you are about to, again, take a leap of faith. It's important to not seek permission, but welcome support. I'll say that again. It's important to not seek permission, but to welcome support. And so again, as I mentioned, I was really afraid of what my family was going to say. I really truly was. I just knew it was going to cause a rift. But again, I had gotten to that point where I was no longer seeking their permission. So when I told them, I was already in the process of doing it. When I told them, I was sending them the video like, this is done. I'm letting you know what has already been done. And again, by God's grace, they received it, they supported me, and they always have, don't get me wrong. But again, I was not seeking their permission, but I was so thankful to have their support. And even when it comes to my friends, some of my friends, a lot of them didn't, even some of my college friends didn't know everything that went on. I was afraid of, like, am I going to offend some people, or are my church people, church friends going to walk away? I don't know. We come up with all these stories in our head of the worst case scenario. But again, you have to come to a level of obedience to where it does not matter if people are with you or not. Again, I think because I had gotten to that place of surrender, to where I was relentless. I was going to do it anyway. When I received that support, I just appreciated it so much more, man, rather than using it as a crutch, or using it as a means or a basis as to whether or not I was going to do it. And I think sometimes, we wait to have people's approval, or to have people backing us up, or to have people in our corner. We wait on that, or we base what we do off of that, man. But when you get to a place of obedience, to where it's like, no, I'm about to do this regardless if y'all like it or not, then you will appreciate the support that you get so much more, man. And so again, it's Luke 14:31 that says, if you want to be my disciple, you must, by comparison, hate everyone else, your father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even your own life. Otherwise, you cannot be my disciple. The word says that if you want to follow me, take up your cross and die to yourself. And so and so know that this step of faith that you're about to take, know that it's not going to be easy, but I think that God will do the work within you to make sure that your inner, that your heart is right, that your mind is right, that he's preparing you internally. And so what I produce externally is just a result of what he's done internally, right? And so I hope that helps somebody, man. I'm trying to see if there's anything else I was going to say, but yeah, I think that as far as like my next steps of telling my story, I've shared this, I think on the last video, but of course I'm in the process of actually writing my first book. It's gonna kind of give a little more detail into my story, but it's gonna be very interactive to try to help people break free from shame and walk into what God has for their lives. And so that's something that I'm working on. Again, I do have a podcast that's also called My Rough Draft Podcast with Melanie Christina, where I I give career and business tips, and that's kind of what I do. Kind of, I guess, what this brand is just, man, marrying faith and business, showing you how God cares about your business, because at the end of the day, it's His business. Showing you how to trust Him through the process of your life, showing you how the healing and the inner work of your life will show into outward success in your career and business. And so it's just really kind of marrying the whole faith, life, and business piece. I speak specifically to 9-to-5preneurs. So I'm a 9-to-5preneur. I still got a 9-to-5 job, and I also have a business that I manage. And so I help other people do that same thing through writing, through coaching, through managing their projects, and so forth. So we'll talk about all that in my future episodes. But I hope that y'all like this episode. Let me know in the comments below, what is your next step of faith? I want you to make a declaration. What is the next big step of faith that you feel like God has called you to do, that you are now ready to walk in obedience in? And so let me know if you have any other questions. Otherwise, I will see y'all on my next episode.